The Raiders decided to part ways, but not one, but two. And Coach Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler counted up. The team ranked dead last in the NFL in rushing yards per game and 29th overall in points.
Well, I think when you look at it, offensively, they're a disaster.
The firing of Josh McDaniels just keeps getting crazier and crazier. I mean, typically we make a video and say, Josh McDaniels was fired, the end. And that's the end of the storyline. Very rarely do you see a aftermath of the situation of this magnitude. The Raiders didn't just fire Josh McDaniels, they quite literally broke him as a man. And whether or not that was deserved, I'll let you guys talk about it in the comment section down below, because it seemed like it was just a failed tactic from him. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Josh McDaniels' second tenure as a head coach went very similarly to his first tenure as a head coach. He got rid of the established quarterback that was either supposed to be the future of the franchise or the established QB that has been their most successful quarterback in almost 2 decades, and then started bringing in ex-New England Patriots to work underneath him and tried to get everyone to buy into his system as opposed to building a system around his successful players, which is what you're supposed to do as a head coach in the NFL. At this point, the Las Vegas Raiders' plan seems to be significantly more promising than their previous plan was. Prior to the firing, they were embarrassed on national television. Devontae Adams looked miserable. Josh Jacobs said that he doesn't know how to fix the offense. And this is a team that has, at minimum, an average quarterback, a top 3 wide receiver, a top 3 running back, a top 3 left tackle, a top 3 edge rusher, and was embarrassed on national TV versus the Detroit Lions. Obviously, something is wrong here. If you had no talent on your team whatsoever, then I would have empathy for you. So the fact that the Raiders were performing so horribly despite their roster not necessarily being the worst roster in the entire NFL is definitely a huge red flag. And we started to see more and more problems with the Raiders as the season went on. Mark Davis would get ridiculed to his face by the fans, and apparently he himself knew that Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were essentially going in the wrong direction. He said it just seemed like we were going in the wrong direction, so with the trade deadline, I just felt like it was time to make a change, time to make a move. He wasn't impressed with the offense because the Raiders' offense was ranked 29th in the NFL in points scored and dead last in rushing yards per game. The offense had been struggling for most of the season, and Davis definitely noticed. It just didn't seem like it was gelling, and as you watched it, it just seemed like it was very important that we made a change. And with McDaniels out, they also fired Mick Lombardi, Jimmy Garoppolo was benched, and Aiden O'Connell got the start against the Giants, which, by the way, they succeeded against. He finally mentioned the reason why he gave the interim job to Antonio Pierce, because this is just like Jeff Saturday. This is a head coach that has 0 NFL coaching experience. He was never on an NFL coaching staff until last year, and although he does have 9 years of playing experience, Davis thinks that Pierce is the perfect guy for the job, saying, "I got the feeling that he was the right guy at the right time, someone who can lead and create and have the respect of the team. After talking to him, I was very confident we made the right choice." And that makes sense. When you look at Antonio Pierce interviews, this guy's absolutely electric.
The short story, the matter of fact is I grew up in Compton, California. I was born a Raider. I was born with the Raiders rolling in the Coliseum in LA. I was rolling with NWA, talking straight out of Compton, rocking Raider hats. So when the opportunity came to work with Josh and Pat Graham and Dave, I jumped on it. So that's what set me up for this. I was born this way.
But Antonio Pierce probably got a job through a different means. On Sunday, we got a bombshell report from Jay Glazer that not only implied that the Las Vegas Raiders told Josh McDaniels how they felt about him, but they quite literally broke this man. And the story is insane because Josh McDaniels let them do it to him. It was literally like Josh McDaniels got onto his knees with his eyes closed and his tongue sticking out and was being surrounded by Raiders players players that were just nutting on his face before they kicked him to the curb, ghosted him, and never talked to him again. That's the best analogy I could give for this situation. And hear it from Jay Glazer yourself.
Such a big disconnect with the players there and Josh McDaniels that players recently were going to the owner, Mark Davis, to tell them what their problems were.
So there was this huge meeting that they had on Thursday that Josh McDaniels invited the Raiders players to do so they could get off all their problems from their chest, and it really went the worst way possible for Josh McDaniels.
This big airing of the grievance meeting, and players just unloaded on Josh McDaniels, from captain to player, and finally Josh McDaniels actually had Antonio Pierce get up and speak on behalf of him.
So the crazy part is Antonio Pierce stood up before everybody and really defended Josh McDaniels perfectly in this instance. The words he said were quite literally perfect for the occasion.
Antonio Pierce got up there. He said, look, guys, we have to have our own culture. It's got to be about culture here. And he brought up the old Giants team that beat the Patriots, Josh McDaniels' team, in the Super Bowl. No matter who we played, we thought we could beat them. We had a game plan that we could beat them. We had to believe that, and that's not here.
Now, for those of you guys that don't know, Antonio Pierce was on that team that defeated the undefeated New England Patriots in 2007. And it's an incredible story to say, to hype up your players, and to give you an idea of how bad Josh McDaniels is. He couldn't even swallow his pride for this 1 or 2 seconds just so his assistant coach, his linebacker coach, could save his career. Watch.
Everybody thinks they're great, except for Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels then goes over to him and says, don't ever talk about the Patriots like that. That got up to Mark Davis, and I think Mark Davis looked at it and go, okay, choose the guy who believes that we can win every single week.
So that's like the worst way possible to handle this situation. I mean, letting your ego get in the way just because the New England Patriots weren't able to win in 2007, which I understand. I mean, Josh McDaniels was the quarterback's coach back then. He was the offensive coordinator back then. It's definitely a part of his career that must have really sucked. But at that point, he should have just said, yeah, well said, and that's it, move on. Now, I think the last part of this will give Raiders fans the most hope for the future, because it's something that Mark Davis wasn't doing before. He should have done it with Rich Bisaccia, but here he is doing it. This is a legitimate shot for Antonio Pierce.
This is not just a throwaway for Antonio Pierce where, he's just going to coach out the rest of the season. He has a shot.
Now, what's crazy about this is you would think that this story isn't real. I mean, it sounds like a fairy tale. There's no way a head coach could be this incompetent to the point where he is chastising his linebacker coach, who did an incredible job hyping up the team, which, by the way, Josh McDaniels would get credit for in this instance, but instead he took it personally and as a result got fired for it. But unfortunately, it seems like it could be true. According to Max Crosby, a friend of the channel and an individual that told us everything we need to know on the Pat McAfee show, it seems like this happened. I mean, watch.
Yeah, we had a big meeting. Everyone shared their piece. It wasn't just about one single person. It was everyone airing out how they felt. But at the end of the day, it was the people that were in the room that really knew what happened. And there was a bunch of people that talked, including myself.
So you can see he's not necessarily denying what happened. You know what I mean? He's not saying stuff didn't happen. He is saying that particular bits of the story might be taken out of context because obviously maybe the Antonio Pierce bit was just a small chunk of what was a very long meeting. But he's not denying it here if you pay attention.
It's supposed to be family business. Like, this shouldn't even, I don't even know how it gets out, but there's always, you know how it is. There's always going to be a couple people that leak stuff.
Now, don't get me wrong. Having your whole team unload on you before losing the worst game of your career is pretty bad. And then getting fired really, really sucks. But the way Josh McDaniels got fired and the way he broke the news to his family is just wow. Okay, so according to Jeff Howie, Josh McDaniels learned the news of his firing while his kids were out trick-or-treating on Halloween, and he had to call them back home on Tuesday night to break the news to his family, per Jeff Howie. This happened a few days after Raiders players and coaches ripped and unloaded into Josh in a team meeting prior to his firing. It's not my job to criticize the way you want to be a parent, but I will say, I think that is really freaking strange. Could you just imagine, like, you're a little kid and you're out trick-or-treating. I don't know how old Josh McDaniels' kids are. I'm not going to go into that. And then your dad gives you a phone call and says, Junior, you need to come back home now. And then you come back home from trick-or-treating and your dad sits there and says, Junior, Daddy got fired. Maybe I just come from a privileged background where my father wouldn't tell me at the time how tough times are, but now that I'm a little older, he'll be transparent with me about how tough times could be or how tough times were in the past. I just don't understand why any individual would call his kids and tell them to come home from what they're doing for news that could have waited until they got home. It's like he set out to ruin the night for his kids or to share in his pain. Now, here's the crazy part. The general manager that hitched his wagon to Josh McDaniels is also calling out Josh McDaniels. So according to Sports Illustrated, ex-general manager Dave Ziegler was again signing quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason and tried to talk Josh McDaniels out of it. Josh McDaniels pushed to sign Garoppolo and gave him a $72.75 million contract, but Ziegler reportedly said it would be a terrible decision. Josh disagreed on a lot per the report. Turns out Ziegler was right, as Jimmy G currently leads the NFL in interceptions. But to be honest, Dave, you screwed yourself from the get-go by hiring this guy and thinking it'd be any different. Dave Ziegler quite literally hired Josh McDaniels within a 24-hour span of being named general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders. So it's on you. Here's the craziest part of all. Everyone assumed that Josh McDaniels is going to head to one direction and one direction only, and that's back into the lap of Bill Belichick, being the offensive coordinator for Bill Belichick and Mac Jones, which, by the way, he was really good at doing, at least during Mac Jones's rookie season. If you remember, a huge reason why Mac Jones regressed in year 2 was because Matt Patricia was his offensive coordinator. They felt like they could fix that by getting him Bill O'Brien for year 3. Now that doesn't necessarily seem to be working. Some people blame the offensive line, some people blame Mac Jones. There's a lot of reasons why this could be happening. So one would think that, hey, maybe if we get Mac Jones the same offensive coordinator that he had in year 1, things would be a little different. But what's crazy about this is now it looks like it doesn't appear like Josh McDaniels is going to return to the New England Patriots. It's kind of interesting because at a specific point, Josh McDaniels was viewed as the future of the New England Patriots. I mean, he agreed to a contract with the Indianapolis Colts a few years ago, but Robert Kraft brought him back by telling him that once Bill Belichick is done, he's going to be coaching the New England Patriots. And eventually he decided to leave for the Raiders and try to make his own culture there. The problem is currently the New England Patriots have Bill O'Brien as an offensive coordinator. So the only choice he'd have is maybe joining as an offensive assistant. Maybe if they decide to fire Bill O'Brien during the 2024 season, Josh McDaniels could be the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. Maybe Bill Belichick feels like that's what will save him. Or maybe you see Josh McDaniels as the next coach in the XFL, which is a very realistic possibility and would be very entertaining to say the least. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this, man. Do you believe the story Jay Glazer brought for us? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.